It's time to talk registration, and you're in the breakout room. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking registration here as I finish up these name badges for Corbin and Jeff. Here we go, Jeff. And Corbin, let me hand you yours as well. I'm sure some of you have actually typed up the badges, and I'm sure had issues with name badge font sizes, having to cut and paste information from your Excel document, or try and figure out how to resort it so you can get the information you need out of it, or had challenges perhaps with reconciling your bank statement with your registration reports at the end of the day. But today we're here to solve those problems and help you get through those challenges. We're going to cover three main areas today, and we'll break them into segments. The first one will be clearly about how to pick a system, how to perhaps change the system you're using or go to another system or upgrade the current system you have. And we'll go into some of the nuances on how to pick the system and the types of questions you'll need to ask. The second part of this will be going into how to improve the experience of your current system, how to the tips and tricks, the back end of the systems you're using. And lastly, we're going to talk tips and tricks to the trends that are out there and how to integrate those systems and tools into the registration system, or maybe not if that's the case for you. This is your forum. We need you asking lots of questions if you're going to get a lot out of this. It's live, so feel free to type through the questions. Right above me is a little bubble. You can click that and start typing your messages. And off to the side, you will actually see the slides from today as we go through. But please, feel free to ask questions as we go through. We're in beautiful Vancouver right now. As you can see, this beautiful destination. I've been fortunate enough to be an attendee, guest, host, and a meeting planner doing registration in this wonderful city that has not just the multicultural facets that are somewhat unique in North America, but really the beauty of the landscape and the outdoors that you can see. From the glaciers up in Whistler all the way down into downtown Vancouver, you really get an incredible experience for your meetings and your personal travel. Great convention center, top-notch hotels. Before we get started, I'm Pete Hanley. I am President and COO of PlanNet. We specialize in registration and housing services, as well as site selection and contract negotiation. I am also your host today. I have two fantastic guests, and we're going to get to introduce them in just a moment. But I just want to remind you that this trailblazing experience is being brought to you on a complimentary basis by PlanNet and the CTC, the Canadian Tourism Commission. And really, if you're considering and looking for a destination to host your meetings or conventions, you really should reach out to the CTC. They can introduce you to some phenomenal cities across Canada in such different areas of the country, but also help you with site visit trips and tickets to get you there to actually experience the destination. I'm sure once you get there, you will select this wonderful place. So let's take a moment, experience a unique Canadian experience, and then we'll begin exploring registration. I've known Jeff and Corbin for 20 plus years. These are two fantastic guys with incredible experience in the industry. Jeff and I have partnered on many occasions on registration and other projects. We actually have fun talking war stories about registration and the interesting experiences customers have. He's from Texas. He's a Longhorn. And I think you'll really get a lot of what he's going to share, a lot out of what he's going to share today with regards to his specific experiences in registration. Corbin, I think, also needs no introduction. Obviously, hundreds of articles, spoken at every major convention. In fact, both of you just came back from AIBTM this morning in Baltimore. So, thank you both for making that trip down here. I know it's a great corridor, so it's great to have you down here today. And for Corbin, I know you have firsthand experience having been a planner in your life, done meetings in DC and in Baltimore, handled the registration. So you really bring an incredible experience firsthand, but also your continuation of staying in the consulting side as well as the speaking side on technologies and registration in particular, I think are going to add incredible value today. So thank you both for being here. I'll tell you, meeting planners, as you know, wear lots of hats. And today we got that registration hat on. And, registration's easy, right? You just stick a couple fields on a page, you collect the data, you run a couple reports, and the money ends up in your account, right? I mean, it is that easy, isn't it? But Yeah, we know it's not. I think what I'm hoping to get to today with you is, and we're going to start with, is really getting to understanding the goals and what we should be asking ourselves about our registration system before we go buy one. Because I think a lot of people buy it and then apply it. So let's go into that. If I could ask you, my first kind of area that I'd like to focus on is, where would I get started? How would I define registration? Can one of you take that on?
I'd like to tell you that you can upgrade that Smith Corona. We had Selectrics, yeah. We had because we had the two. We could put the different balls in for the different fonts,
nice.
And it was great.
Nice.
So that's how we started registration: is index cards and Selectrics. But it just seemed like it was more than just plugging fields onto HTML. We had to start thinking about what we wanted to do. Our stakeholders started asking us about, how are we going to show the results of the meeting? Or it's not just how many people have registered. They wanted to know what the results of the registration were. So we started thinking about the reporting and what the stakeholders have to have. So it was more the data collection as an end result rather than just throwing it up there to be able to register. Because when we first started online registration, back in the early 90s or so, it was email. I mean, we were getting emails and taking that information and then plugging it into reports, Excel or the like. True. It's come a long way.
It really has. Corbin, and for you?
Yeah, I think the concept of online registration is something I like to prefer the broader term attendee management, because it really is the whole range of technologies, from travel to the sign-ups for different parts, different components of it. But more importantly, it's establishing that relationship with your customer, your member for your association, and that's a repeat and ongoing thing. The data that you collect at registration should be part of that whole marketing process, and that's where the real strength of attendee management comes in. Is it's establishing and tracking and being able to treat your customer the way you should be, with a personalized, customized service.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think you guys hit it on the head with the fact that it really is more than data in the field, right? I mean, it's the analytics, it's the data collection, it's what am I doing with that data at the end. So as we're all sitting here and trying to decide what system should I buy, and obviously there's an array of software and services and combined out there, where do I begin? What should I set as my end result, my goals with these systems before I start even, looking into them?
Well, I recommend the meeting planners that are looking at that. My past life is as a meeting planner, but the last 14 years I've been working as a technology analyst about how you use technology to improve the business process with that. And I recommend starting with the end in mind. You start with the goals of what do you want, what are the purposes that you're going to do. One size does not fit at all in the meetings industry. There are all sorts of goals and meetings and purposes and size and all these things. They're very different. There's a whole range. There are more than 200 attendee management products out there, and so you want to start with the end in mind. What specifically do you want to do? Do you need travel? Do you need large multi-track conferences? Is it a simple registration? Are you managing an exhibit? There are lots of things that are involved with that. So start with collecting those goals to begin with of what you want with that. I think would be one of the first steps.
First of all, I'm going to give a really shameless plug to CorbinBall.com. When I'm looking for anything technology, I go to CorbinBall.com. Go to his bookmarks file, and then he's got, I think I counted 124 individual companies that are just listed under attendee management and registration. So that's a good place to go. The other place that I tend to go or want to go is more to colleagues. I mean, you can go to the companies and ask them, but I don't know. It's not that you get a bad answer. It's just that you get their answer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see on LinkedIn all the time somebody say, can anybody recommend a system?
Oh, yeah.
But I've never seen anybody say, I'm trying to accomplish this. Do you know of a system that does that? And it's amazing how the answer changes, right? It's kind of like app envy these days. Everybody just likes and hears another app, so they go buy it or put it on their device and then never know what to do with it because it didn't really suit their needs.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the LinkedIn thing, because I follow those too, and it's like, and they'll do that. They'll say, because somebody give me a recommendation, and then you get all these recommendations either from companies or people that use them, and those are good. but it's never, you never seem to see the reason for it. I mean, this is what it solved for me. These are the stakeholders that were served.
So what are those things it will solve? What should I be writing down as my goals with a registration system?
Start at the back and work forward.
Okay.
We mentioned stakeholders before. If what you need to be able to do is keep your hotel informed, keep your DMC informed, keep the attendees able to go in and edit their own information, to change their mind. It's, cutoffs. I mean, is it something that you need to have, an early bird registration that automatically cuts off? Most of those things are automatic in the systems, but not always. But if that's a big part of what you do, if you're an association planner, especially where you've got 14 different categories of attendees,
right,
and each one has a different fee and different cutoff date and a different refund policy, you got to think about all of that stuff and have those questions. And I always suggest that before you start shopping, get your team around you and say, where have the problems been?
Yeah, that's a great point, because you mentioned reducing redundancy earlier, which should be probably one of the #1 goals you're trying to get rid of, right? Which is analyze where you're doing things twice, 3 times, 4 times, and more, and go, okay, how can I use technology to simplify that? Corbin, how about you?
One of the things that I'm often asked, well, what is the best technology? What's the best registration or other technology? And for registration, I somewhat facetiously answer, but it's really part of it. Well, I can answer that question, but I need to ask you 100 questions to do so. And so it really is branching down. But I think one of the key questions to ask is how is that data that you're collecting going to integrate in with your database? And how are you going to use that? That is, the reporting component of it is very important, but getting that back into your database so you can use that for future meetings is such an important part of this whole process. And also there are other issues. In these days of data security, how are the finances managed? Is it PCI compliant? I think that's one key question that's going to differentiate many of the online management vendors from others, is that it's PCI compliance becomes a very important, it's payment card industry compliance, which is a very high standard. If they're meeting that, they have made a big step in providing a fully rounded system.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the security certainly is a major concern these days, as we're hearing constantly, major banks even, losing credit card information and names and data out to the public. How about for the attendee experience? Is there anything as far as a goal I should have? Because again, we're saying, okay, it's more than just collecting data, and you guys have gotten reduced redundancy. Certainly the marketing side of increasing your attendance is so part of registration. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the attendee experience is it is the front end, and most of the systems tend to sell you not on results, but on how easy it is to create a website and how pretty it's going to be, and you got this beautiful background, that you can show you're going to Vancouver, and that's important. I mean, the marketing part of it is key, and depending on the different kinds of meetings, marketing may be the most important thing or the least important thing. It may be a corporate meeting where, hey, you have to go.
Great point.
And if that's the case, it has a whole different perspective on it. But it's not just the pretty pictures. But when I'm thinking about building a site, it really is how easy can I get the HTML up there? How easy can the attendee flow through the registration process? I mean, is there a crumb trail that you can follow that says, hey, I'm almost done with this,
great point.
And then go from there.
How about you, Corbin? Any thoughts on that?
I think that the easy-to-use attendee experience is one of the things that online registration really does. It improves that process. You can access it anytime, 24/7, anywhere that you have access to the web. And so, but I contend with all technology, the key to adoption is ease of use. That's the #1 criteria. So as you walk through that experience, how easy is it for your attendees to enter in? Can you pre-populate the fields if they're from your database and make that a much simpler process? Can they make changes? How easy is that process? Do they get an automated confirmation that has that link for the new updates? If it's a branching registration, which I think oftentimes is a good route to go. If you're an exhibitor, you have a whole different set of fields and options than if you're an attendee, for example. How easy does that work? How well does it configure to the needs of the attendee using it? That ease of use is so important.
Well, one of the considerations certainly for everybody is, do I build a system, do I buy a system, and then all the acronyms come in and all the letters, right? Is it an ASP, an SQL, an AMS? What should I use for registration? Do I need to integrate it? Do I not need to integrate it? And where is this data and everything else being stored? How do I make that decision? How do I know if I need to buy it, use an ASP, or use Excel or SQL? How do I make that decision?
Wow. PDQ.
Yeah.
Now, it's, you really have to know your own framework. I mean, what kind of meetings do you do? And, what is your budget? What are the needs of all the people that are playing in the bar? And you can do online registration through something like Evite. Or you can go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get systems in place. So you sort of have to know what you want first and what your needs are, and then you start saying build or buy. I mean that's a tough one. I mean we used to sort of say, well if you have the IT department in place, then you can keep that as a consideration. But there's so many great tools out there right now. You start asking the question, do you ever build?
Yeah,
and we argue about that a little bit.
And build's a relative term, right? Because build could be starting from scratch and picking the technology it's going to be built on, but build is also relative to, I may already have a system and still need to build within that system, right?
Pretty much I have recommended for a long time. It used to be, we came to the days when everybody was building it because they were just starting. They were nascent. Online registration was nascent. But recently, the question I'd ask is, what is your core function? Are you a software developer? Is that what you're doing? Or are you managing meetings and events? And you put the expertise where it lies, and I think you get a much oftentimes get a much better option when you buy a system that is easily configurable rather than customizable, where you're changing it to your specific needs. You find one that fits you and then let them manage the continuous of development. There's a constant development path that's happening here. Every year the web advances, and you let the developers do that. If they're in secure data farms, which is far more secure than you could ever manage on your own local servers probably. Sure. And so to do that, but to buy is better than building it yourself, although things have changed in the last couple of years where it's getting a lot easier, and there are open source tools out there. What used to take $100,000 to do and weeks of time to develop now can almost be done by a gifted teenager in their bedroom on the weekend.
True.
It's changed so much. In open source software, there are options that are coming out that if you have a simple registration, there are cases where you could build it yourself.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I watch so many planners who go out and there are obviously hundreds of products out there, but they buy whatever it is and they think they're getting much more than a software product. They're getting services, they think. Mm-hmm. And so that tends to be one of the challenges. And with how many hats we all wear as planners, should I really be it may be easy to build, but should I be the one building it as a planner? What's your thought on that?
We built our company on that. I mean, AMI sort of said, registration is high customer service. You have to be there all the time. You have to be listening. You have to know the technology, but it's not something that is a real strategic thing for a meeting professional to be focusing on is how to type that name badge up.
Right.
So we felt like being able to outsource that service would be a strategically good concept. So meeting professionals who say it's taking a lot of time, I may not even need to worry about whether it's build or buy or anything else if I can go to a company that specializes in this and say, what do I need to do?
So I can use the data as a planner as opposed to having to learn how to build.
Right. You need to think about what I need to accomplish, not how to stack the blocks to make it happen. So if built, and that's one of the things we talk about open source. I mean, we started using DT Register, Civi CRM. These are open source softwares that are good for certain things. I wouldn't suggest it for anybody. I wouldn't even suggest maybe an organization going in and doing it themselves. But if you find somebody that knows how to do it, it can be put together just with simple building blocks. And open source is a good way to go.
Corbin, should I be, if I'm a planner, should I be doing it?
I think almost always not. I mean, you have better things to do. Planner has 1,000 balls that you're juggling, and it's and managing the fields and how you do this, and the mechanics of doing that. Some people may really like that, and it might fall in. There are cases that it does, but I think that there are more important things to do. It's matter they should be worried about the data on the other end and how those reports are happening and those things, but it's kind of like an internal combustion engine. You turn on the key and you drive away. You don't have to worry about the nuts and bolts of making how that works. And I think most of the cases it's better to leave that to a company that's providing those services.
Well, and it's easy. I think it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, you shouldn't be building a meeting planner. But I think, if anything, if we could help the planner maybe position this in front of their superiors, because often we're just pushed these things on us, right? You got to go handle the meeting, and that means everything, even though the person who handed it to us has no idea what that really entails. What could they do? What resources do you think they could use to help justify to their bosses or to their execs why they need to find somebody who specializes, whether it's another staff person, whether maybe it's their IT person who knows some reg, maybe it's outsourcing it, right? Finding the right partner like AMI to actually do it. But how do I justify that to my superior? Because they think that's what my job is. How do I get by that?
Right. We used to. I did consulting before we formed AMI, and we'd go into an organization and get the planning group together, but also spend time talking to like the CFO, CTO, and we'd get IT at the table. And interestingly, most of the time I was talking about online registration. And interestingly, when you get IT at the table, they look at the process of online registration and they say, we can do that. That's not so hard.
Right.
It's a pretty simple technology, and it really kind of is. But when you turn around and ask the question, okay, who's going to maintain it? Do you have the staff for that? Do you have the budget for that? How's that going to be done? Is it? How do we keep it secure? That sort of changes the dynamic.
That's a great point. Corbin, how about you? How would I justify this as a planner?
Well, the typical statistics out there is that compared to the old ways of doing things, paper-based or typewriter ways of doing things, the increases in efficiency are 90% or more. I mean, you cut the costs, you decrease the errors, you reduce all the redundancies in terms of doing that, and you also can use that data for marketing and for those things. That it's a no-brainer. It is the true original killer app for the meetings industry is online registration and attendee management. And I think you justify that. The good news with a lot of these systems is that the price is dropping on these. There are some products that are free or nearly free or at a much less cost point than they have been in the past. And I think you're going to see that trend continue as well, that the way the exponential growth of technology is driving it, that's going up. Well, it's also the costs are going down in many ways because of that, because it's simpler, easier to do, easier to develop, easier to interoperate with other programs.
I think you bring up a really good point, because cost is certainly, we see registration transaction costs, if you will, gone down to almost nothing, right? But I think what is missing so often is people analyzing how much time it actually takes to still do all those things you brought up, like building it and actually creating the reports and managing the reports. Before we help them ask or come up with the questions to ask the vendors to pick the right system, what do I have to think about myself, look internally about before I pick a system? Because I think one of the things that I know, certainly from having worked with, certainly you and I have talked about this in the past, in picking a system is really going, what kind of buyer am I? Am I really looking to have the efficiencies and save costs? Or am I somebody that once I get into the system and see all the things I can apply it to, am I going to start going after all those that low-hanging fruit and start applying it? Because I think you can often sometimes use some of the more simpler systems and then go, gosh, I wish I had that, or because now you've experienced it, right? Give me some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, one of the things that plays into that is the modular approach to software development. So if you've decided that, yes, we're going to go online and we are going to use this type system, you may be asking the vendor, if I start here with the simple stuff, I don't need credit card transactions yet, or I don't need housing yet. Can I add those as I go? And so sometimes a modular approach is a good way to go about it.
And that is a great point, actually, and making sure you're thinking ahead. Don't buy for what you need today, but buy for what you're going to need tomorrow, because there's a huge investment up front in learning curve on all these systems, no matter how easy they are to, and companies, right? It's not just the systems that aren't easy right off the bat. It may be easy to build the site, but to get into all that other stuff takes many meetings and many failures often to get there. Right, Corbin?
I agree. It goes back to what I said earlier, one size does not fit all. So you have to establish what your goals are. And is marketing important to what you want to do? Is that corporate meetings, your attendance is mandatory. You really don't need to market it. But for association meetings and many types, you need, NAGBR can be a very important in registration attendance building tool. Also, viral marketing components that are working into some registration tools now can increase that attendance. So you have to look at what your specific mix is as you develop this out and see if those are going to be fed and met by the different products that you're looking at. And going back to PCI compliance as well, that security component, well, if you're taking any, collecting any type of personal data, especially credit card information, you've got to get that one nailed as well.
Any thoughts or tips on now from the vendor, asking the question of the vendor? Now I've decided I want to go buy an ASP, or I'm going to use I'm not going to build it in-house, if you will. I need to determine what questions should I be asking to make sure I get the right tool for me. I've done a self-analysis. I now know I'm doing this. What do I ask the vendor before I get that contract in hand?
I would start with the PCI component. I mean, there's very little that we do in registration that doesn't touch on some fairly sensitive information, and one breach can bring you down. Sure. Ask anybody. So it's just not something you want to mess with. So that's really important. But again, if you've gone through your checklist of what you need to accomplish, and you have your must-haves and would like to haves, and you've gone through that, then you've got what you can start asking your vendors about. As Corbin said, if marketing is a huge part of what you do, you want to see that in action. And I also like to recommend that if you start with the vendor, sometimes you can go through a lot and have a lot of conflicting information or just confusing information.
Right.
If you can talk to your colleagues, if you can go to your local MPI chapter and talk to people about what they use, it can be helpful, because they will tell you what doesn't work.
Right, it's true.
And then also just within the system, we use certain meetings, and certain meetings has a certain community online. And you can go in and talk to other people who have had problems. And it's not filtered. I mean, there's some answers in there that maybe aren't exactly the most flattering, but it's a good place to go. And but you want honest answers to the questions that you've laid out.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Corbin, do you have any other thoughts for somebody? What question should I ask them?
Well, I would echo what Jeff said from that standpoint. I think that it's so important that your colleagues and your peers who've been through it, they've worked through, they have their likes, their specific needs, they can really give you great advice about what their pitfalls were and how to avoid them. I think that's an excellent advice there.
One of the things also I have found that really useful, and again, success is going from failure to failure with great enthusiasm, and I've learned this the hard way, that you probably also can involve your senior execs with, is flowchart the process that you want to then put online. Don't go buy the system and then try and figure out and just ask questions of that vendor whether they can or can't do it, because they're not going to necessarily understand it in the context in which you've done it in the past or you want to do it in the future. So if you can have your execs help you flowchart it, first of all, it's going to remind them of how complex this actually is and that it's not as easy as it seems. So you'll be doing yourself a major service on the front end, right? Sure. The value of your job and that you've actually thought through this. But I'll tell you what, if you can add a flow chart of what you're trying to do to a vendor and say, okay, I want to build this process with your tool, and you can start asking the questions relative to each section, I think all of us are. Now, of course, it takes an upfront time commitment, but it gets rid of so many headaches down the road, right?
Well, that's what builds your RFP. I mean, if you've really got it flowcharted and talked to all the people that are involved in the process, then you've got those questions to put into the RFP that can go out. And it's the ones I've seen, it's like yes, 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 and it's like well, show me.
Yes.
It's like you have to be able to see it with your own eyes.
I would think additionally with that though is to be a little flexible. You can flow chart it out, and this is the way you've always done it, and yet it may not exactly fit in, and don't get so rigidly locked into the way that you've always done it that you're unwilling to make slight adjustments to make that system work for you as well. Because the association I used to work for, we got caught in that conundrum at times, and I think that if you're flexible, it's not about customization. You don't customize software. You want to configure existing software to meet your needs, and that's the cheapest, least expensive way to go, and I think the most flexible way to go as well.
Corbin, I think that's one of the most important points today so far, is that the flexibility is key. You don't want to take a process that may be great manually or with the system you're using now and then just automate it with the new system, because you may have just created a nightmare that's going to give you more manual tasks and different manual tasks. You do not want to be doing, once you go to an online registration system, you should not be doing these manual tasks anymore, right, of sorting and filtering Excel and whatever. That should be done within the system and make it instant for you, right?
On Corbin's panel yesterday that he was on, I think it was Brad Newman at AIBTM, was saying that if we can hit 90% of what we need to do, we can adjust the other 10%.
Right.
And it makes it really easy. So and it may be more of an 80-20 rule, but I mean you can't expect the software to do everything exactly the way you want. And if you decide to break it and fix it, you're talking about ASP, and we can talk about that whole system of service as a software. But you can't just say tweak it for me. You have to tweak it for everybody. So it gets expensive.
Any international considerations that somebody should have with a registration system? If I'm thinking of doing an international meeting or I have one?
The beauty of the new software tools, the Web 2.0, the way it's developed in the last few years is that they're built at the core to be multilingual, and multi-currencies, 2-bit, Chinese characters, all those things can be built into that system. And and so many of the software providers you're seeing, the ASPs, the modern ones, language is not really an issue. You can do it right down to the help menus. It recognizes what language you're using in your browser and will conform accordingly. Yeah. So it's becoming less and less of an issue all the time.
It's true. Yeah. Anything for you, offhand? Financial maybe issues?
I was going to bring up the financial because they will work with numbers and numbers of currency, but there's some back-end considerations. It's not necessarily the online registration software. It's the other companies, the merchant card processors, and the international banks that might be an issue. Yes, and your software vendor can probably help you with that. Yes. But it's something you need to know. I mean, we've run into it ourselves.
Well,
recently.
The other thing I've noticed also is, build the site and the process and the flow in English first and get it through, then go start doing the other languages. Don't try and build them all at the same time, because you are going to be changing so much and eventually the sites are not going to be the same. And don't just do a translation, because obviously the languages, although they translate, the feeling or the marketing language or the way you're saying it is very different. So you really need to make sure you're getting somebody who specializes in that language to help you get that on the other side.
You can't do that just through Google Translate?
Yeah, exactly. I've tried to do that over the years in many cases, and it hasn't worked out well.
Well, there are huge issues about huge database issues, as well as how you manage different languages and how you would, for example, integrate Chinese characters into a database. So it can be done, but those are big challenges as well. But we are increasingly an international world and connected, and so those issues. And the beauty is that the web tools are coming along with that need.
I'd also highly recommend that before you go buy the system and you commit to anything, that you go in and mess with a site. Don't just build a couple forms and put some data in there. Try and create some reports. Ask them to show you how to create the reports and the badges that you're going to use, because it's too late once you bought and you're in. Have them show you those things, because again, like Jeff was saying earlier, begin with the end in mind. Have them show you what that end result is before you buy. I think that is key. Okay, so now I've got my system, I'm already using it. What other tips and tricks can I have in bettering my experience now that I'm actually using the system? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that one of the things that happens is you say, okay, this is really easy to throw HTML up and create these nice looking, easily navigable sites. But with us, I mean, a lot of what we're seeing is our customers are coming to us and saying we have very, very specific brand standards, and everything has to look exactly right. So as Corbin so aptly put, and one size does not fit all. So one of the things that we need to say, one of the tips and tricks is, you really need to know a little HTML. The salespeople may not say that. Right. They may say, hey, in fact, they sell it as, you don't have to know HTML. Right. What we've found is you have to know HTML and you have to know CSS. Yes. You have to be able to go in and make the registration site look like the parent website and do some of the same things. You might need some Flash or some really interesting stuff. So spend some time getting to know that. I mean, that's the biggest tip that we learned, is that it's not as easy as pushing a couple of buttons and hitting submit. Right.
So making sure the right skill set person is on the job.
Right.
Corbin?
Well, and depending on how important your brand is, and for some, it's not as important, but for major corporations and so forth, branding is everything, and that's where a value-added reseller can be a helpful person, a company that uses one of the major software companies, but really adds on all those tips and tools that can make it configured exactly to what your needs are, and so that can be a helpful choice for meeting planners as well.
So from a standpoint of an attendee, we definitely want it to be easier for an attendee too, not just us as builders, right? After you use the word attendee management, obviously it's your company's name too, so it's very applicable here. At the end of the day, what considerations should I have with regards to attendee management? I'm an attendee, now I have questions about program, about how to use the system, about who to contact for this. What should I be thinking about in buying the systems in that capacity?
Well, you want to make it pretty simple for the attendee to get help. The systems that I've seen, we mentioned certain, but we've worked with Cvent and Reg Online, Reg Web, and others, and built our own. One of the key things is down there at the bottom is email registration assistance. How do I get help? We always try to design a web page, or a registration page, so that you sort of in one glance you can get the whole thing, move on to the next one, but not have it 14 pages long. So there's some compromises there, and a lot of these have tons and tons of questions that they need answered. Think about going through the process yourself. Yes. And if you can go through it and it's easy, or get somebody that's not working on the program, to go through it and say, is it easy to get through? Can I get it in? Am I getting the information I want? But the testing and the quality control is something that is crucial.
Great point.
I go back to what I said earlier, that easy use is the key to adoption and key to satisfaction. It needs to be easy enough that your grandmother can use it, is the rule that I always say with that. And so you walk through that process and you help them. And I think that getting somebody that's unfamiliar with it and ask them to test that and look at it from a new set of eyes could be a really helpful part of that. But it's going back to that high quality of ease of use is really part for all technology adoption.
And have little click pop-ups for the user. For those users who do want to spend a little more time understanding the choices, make sure you give them the information that they need to make those informed decisions. So one, they have less questions for you, right? Don't blanket the page with all the data, but allow them to get to that data. And the other thing I think that's often forgot is, once they click on that and they type that message, where is that ending up? And how fast, right? We've lowered our expectations so much to go, oh man, they're never going to get back to us if I email that. I think we've got to be thinking about, as the planner building it, or the IT person building it, where is it ending up and how fast? What if that person that's checking that public folder or whatever is going to be out sick, right? I mean, have you any thoughts?
When we contract, when we work with a client, that's one of the things that comes up. They want to know what our response time is. Mm-hmm. So if somebody clicks, email registration assistance, not only are they sending an email, but there's also a phone number there they can call. Right. There's a lot of times there's a person's name. Right. So ask for Pete.
Right. Don't ask for me.
Oh, yeah, right. But it's like,
how
do you personalize it so that if somebody is struggling a little bit, because let's face it, online registration, it's not for not everybody is 23 years old.
Yes.
And it can be a little bit of a struggle. And every single page has email registration assistance or contact registration assistance. Right. And then we have to guarantee to our clients that emails will be answered same day. Telephones will be answered without going to voicemail. Right. And those are some of the performance standards that we sign up for.
Corbin?
As software continues to develop, as web-based tools continue to develop, the process is getting easier. And with rich internet applications, you just have to mouse over rather than click on to open up a whole new window. I mean, that whole interface is much more desktop-like than it is becoming more desktop-like than it has in the past. So as you look at the vendors, look at the ones that are using these more modern tools that make an easier, more intuitive experience with that. And we'll maybe get in a little bit later, but also making sure that your app is mobilized and those type of things as well, that increasingly people are going to be going to their tablet or their mobile application to do it as well. So you look at the golden rule of marketing is you market to where people are and what they're using, and so that's a question to be asking as well, is how are they accessing and what do they want? How easy is it for them?
One of the things on that note I think that the meeting host needs to make sure they're doing also is thinking about not just that how it's coming into you, these questions, but how we're responding. I think as much as email for your staff is really easy to respond with, if that person has any question, they should pick up that phone and call the person. They're going to solve the problem a lot faster, make it less frustrating for the attendee on the other side, and perhaps upsell them on something else. Find out something about their organization where the other attendees might be, or maybe a sponsorship opportunity. So I think it can be a revenue source too. We would think of registration as a passive thing. It can also be a very active aspect. One of the big issues that we have certainly seen in all of the technology that's grown for online registration is that transition from, I got everybody registered pre, now what am I going to do on site, right? What the heck should I be thinking about here as a planner? What should I be asking? Sensitive subject.
Well, the online systems are, you've got to have the internet. So when you go into the convention center or the hotel, sometimes bringing internet into the registration area is not cheap. I mean, you've got to budget for that, and you've got to have good internet access for any of this stuff to work. There are very few products. You may know of some, Corbin, that I don't, but very few, if any, products where you can take the online database and everything that goes with it and mobilize it and bring it down, put it on a local server. Generally, you have to take the data, completely redo it as in a server-based system and then go out if you don't have internet access.
Right.
But just the process of printing a name badge, on site, a one-off, on site is it's not always that easy in these systems, and you have to really think about that. And it's one of those things you need to ask your vendor: what happens when I go on site? And they'll tell you, oh, well, we can set up kiosks for people to register, on site. But there's some very practical applications thereafter. I mean, printing the confirmation is not going to be much of a problem.
Right.
How does that badge get done?
Right.
How does the rest of the process get finished?
Money get in your
how does the
account,
money
right?
get in? Yeah, right,
Corbin?
exactly.
I think Jeff hit it right on. I mean, most online registration systems don't really have that worked out in a great way. If you have very large meetings, you hire a registration service to come in if you're doing trade shows, because they're specialized in that redundancy and all the things that need to do with that. I think that the access to the internet is getting much more reliable and cheaper, and if you, in fact, you could even avoid using the hotel or the convention center internet itself if it's too expensive with MiFi, hotspots, for example, in some cases. But you really have to check that out. You have to, this is mission critical stuff that you're working with, and figuring out if you're going to rely on that internet, is it going to be absolutely rock solid? Those are the things that will vary from location to location.
What about my data? What about backing up my data? I mean, they're all going to tell me that they back up their data, but there's a big difference between backing up data and disaster recovery. And they're doing more disaster recovery rather than backup of data. Something changes something. Are there things I should be thinking about there? What should I be doing? Any comments, any thoughts?
Generally, if you're using an ASP, an application service provider for that, these online registration companies, almost all are ASPs. Generally, the data is more secure than you could ever do it yourself. And the backup is their full-time job is in data farms are protecting and backing up data. And so generally it's they're very good questions to ask, but you're in pretty good shape in going that route.
I think you're safe with the ASP, but it's like if you can create a master report that basically has all the answers to all the questions, and you have it there and can get it down to Excel easily, and that should be a no-brainer on any of the ASPs. I mean, just to have that little. I mean, yes, the SAS systems, the ASP systems, they do exactly that. They are redundant. They're crazy about it. I mean, because if they lose your data, they're gone.
Right.
So they have to make it work. But just a little bit of extra backup, just sort of makes you rest easier.
But also, I think for most of us, we are going into the relationship talking about how wonderful it's going to be, how easy it's going to be, what can I do, but we forget to talk about what's it going to be like when we break up, because breaking up it's hard to do, as this song says, right? And I think if we think about it and talk about it up front with the vendor before you buy them, is where is this data going to be? How can I get it? Should I be sending myself regular reports so I do have it in Excel in case I have back, or am I going to integrate? Right, because that's a whole other thing. Am I going to use my association management software, or should I, right, through some type of API? And again, maybe Corbin, do you want to tell everybody what an API is? Because they probably hear this language and go, what the heck is that?
API is Application Programming Interface, and essentially what it is a software toolbox that makes the process of data sharing from one website to another easy. The most simple example I can think of is you can use your Facebook profile to log on to many different types of sites. They're using an API to do that their data exchange from one site to another. But it can be done for very rich data as well. And so that's a nice thing, is that with an API you can figuratively bolt one type of product, a travel management product, onto an attendee management product, onto a car rental program. You can do all these things in a lot easier way than you've ever been able to do before. APIs are what's making, is part of what's driving down the cost of doing attendee management, because it's getting simpler and easier to do all the time.
Well, it's interesting because PlanNet is a passkey licensee as well, and they've just announced, you mentioned mobile, that they're the first mobile housing tool, right? But the integration, the API side is very important, right? That ability to go from registration system to housing. You want to elaborate on?
Not just housing, but I mean, what we get a lot of is working, especially in corporate, but associations have huge databases of their members, and their registration systems aren't always connected up. I mean, they may be two separate systems, and if you can create that link so that you attend the meeting, and then the registration system says, AMS, Pete attended the meeting. And so you have it there. That way the registration stuff can go away to the next meeting, but the permanent record, as we said in high school, stays in place. And with corporations, you've got to be able to go into a Siebel database, or something or a SQL, or so all this stuff, or Salesforce, or any of the CRMs. We had a situation just recently where they wanted, as soon as you checked in, for registration, it updated the Salesforce.com database and said this person has attended.
Well, it is interesting because I think from the standpoint of integration, that term, like the word green, means so many things. I mean, integration could be as much as I take your Excel document, map it to my database, and it's integrated, or to an API, or actually linking the databases, right? And there's such extremes and questions. You guys should be asking those vendors if you're going to need it. Integration isn't a must. It doesn't need to happen. But there are good reasons. If you're going to use the data, I think that's the key, because I've seen so many organizations with association management software say, okay, we're going to integrate, but they don't end up using the reports and the data that's in there. So if you're not, don't spend the money to integrate. But if you are going to use the data for marketing and obviously to focus on increasing attendance or attendee satisfaction, a must-have. Any other thoughts? No on that? Okay. Do you think it's a must-have to do an API? Do you think you should do it? I mean, what's your thought on that?
I think you definitely should be integrating your data almost always.
Right.
And so that's, I mean, the real strength of what you have is that data, and for marketing and all the purposes, and integration, and truly digitizing your business process. If you want to look at, so a piece of paper is a white flag of inefficiency. And if you want to look at where the inefficiencies are in the way you manage your business process, look for the paper, because that's where the problem is. And if you're truly digitizing your business process, you are integrating, you're using that data over and over again to market, to find out what their preferences are. There's a whole range of ways that it can be done.
So before we go into the final step, let's watch another experience in Canada. Canada, keep exploring.
How high can a human body fly? He went clear out of the camera shot. Here it comes. He's walking. He's walking.
Live webcasts bring unpredictable results. Today is obviously a good example. Man, time flies by when you're having fun. Registration, certainly, as you can tell, is a very complex process. There's a lot of things to think about. I hope today we were able to give you some insights and strategic thoughts on how to approach upgrading, changing, buying new systems, or even improving your current systems. From a takeaway standpoint, don't just ask one question. Ask the follow-up question to qualify the things that they're saying to you. It is really important. Also, make sure that the person with the right skills is assigned to the right task. Otherwise, it just ends up being frustrating for everyone, and all these great benefits and reasons that you went with a technology in the first place are lost because you don't take advantage of the redundancy reductions and the boost in productivity. You just create other processes and tasks for yourself. And unfortunately, it will frustrate you and the people, the stakeholders that you're involved with, whether it be the attendee or your boss. We're going to continue this discussion, if you'd like, at facebook.com/Canada Meetings. I want to thank the CTC and PlanNet for sponsoring this event and, again, making this live webcast available to you. I certainly want to thank Corbin Ball and Jeff Rasco for both being here today. They bring some incredible experiences and insight. Please tell your company, your coworkers, that these are actually recorded webisodes as well. So you can come back to yourmeeting.com and click on the breakout room and watch any of this broadcast or other broadcasts and learn more about these processes and systems, or share it with your boss to help them understand what we're talking about. If you have any questions or would like to know who your CTC, your Canadian Tourism Commission contact is, please email us at planneteducationseries@yourmeeting.com. We'd be happy to share that information. When it matters, discuss it in the breakout room.